Inside the Crazy Ant Farm, man. How are you tonight?
I'm doing good. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Oh, you're very welcome. We're excited. We always love to talk to fellow filmmakers, and we loved hearing the stories about how you get involved and the journey and the path, especially with people like yourself that made the leap from another country over. And then, even though you kind of grew up young, right, and you're still making that leap over and kind of the whole transition from a different career path at one point and then into the acting. So we love that because this podcast is built for up-and-comers trying to get into the industry. So these type stories are fantastic, and we always love to highlight them. So what we want to do, what we always like to do at the start of the show is kind of do a little introduction for those who might not be familiar with you or your work. So kind of explain that. Let's start off about you making the jump from India to the Pacific Northwest, and then acting. Was it something that you always kind of wanted to get into the industry, or did you kind of fall into that? Kind of talk about that a little bit.
Sure. So the jump for me wasn't too difficult because I was jumped over when I was like 2 years old.
There you go.
So no issues. So I grew up in the Pacific Northwest. Went to school out in the greater Seattle area, and then eventually I was a dog for a while, University of Washington.
There you go.
So growing up and going through high school and college, I really had no intention of going in the entertainment industry or acting or anything along those lines. So I had different objectives back then. So I really never thought about it much other than the fact that I enjoyed movies. So I loved movies. I recall, watching, Indiana Jones, Star Wars, all those great films, and just being completely immersed in the theater experience. But other than that, no, I never looked at my friends who were in drama class and said, "Hey, man, I really want to do that." I was like, "No, I'm cool. I'm good. I don't want to get on stage. I don't want to do what you did. It looks too hard." So it's good. So I went a different route. I had a calling towards medicine, and I pursued that. And I ended up, doing my undergraduate at University of Washington. Then I went to Tulane University in New Orleans. So I spent about 5 years out there. And then I did my specialty training here in Los Angeles at USC. And so I graduated fundamentally at USC and started working in my respective career and thriving. And I really enjoyed it. However, as a function of being in Los Angeles, you make friends with people in the arts.
Yeah.
And make a lot of friends with individuals in the arts, whereas my core group of friends were really more in the sciences as I was growing up. So I got introduced to a lot of different artists, and I started looking at life through their lens. And if you will, I sort of had a renaissance. So I really enjoyed what I was doing. However, I looked at the arts and I said, that looks really fun, and it's stimulating a different side of my mind. And so I started pursuing it at the same time.
Oh, very interesting. I love that too, because you're always looking for ways to grow as a human being and to grow your creative thinking and all of these different aspects, because we always talk about once you feel like that you accomplished everything, that's when you're done. You have nothing else left to give to the craft, and sometimes that can sometimes mean you're washed up in certain aspects. So but it's good to hear that you're always challenging yourself and always continuing to move forward, because that is very important as a human being to keep doing. And I'm very curious too, so you started off like in the film and television space, right? Not in theater?
That's correct.
All right. So did you start off with like going to classes and different things like that? Or did you try to like find an agent and try to get everything worked out? Or how did that come about?
Okay. So I took a little different route.
Okay.
I didn't go to drama school, obviously.
Right.
I wasn't trained in that. And I didn't do any theater. So I was looking at the landscape of what was happening in Los Angeles, and the friends that I had at the time were very independent and collaborative. So what I decided to do was I decided to write a screenplay
Mm.
for myself. So I'm going to use the analogy. It's not a great analogy, but I think it's the one that everyone knows. So you look at somebody like Sylvester Stallone, right?
Right.
Use his analogy. So he's like, yeah, I wrote the screenplay, and at that time, it really worked, for an individual like that. So in my case, I was like, my friends were saying, hey man, you could probably do some leading man stuff, but
Mm.
I'm not sure if you're going to fit into the mold. And this was like the early 2010s.
Right.
And we weren't sure if I was going to quite exactly fit into that mold, or because of my heritage, hey, am I going to be like, relegated to playing like the doctor or something like that?
Right.
So what I thought might be interesting was to create a role for myself that is diametrically opposed to what I am in real life. So in real life, I'd be considered a healer. And so what if I was someone who, instead of being a healer, was someone that was actually taking life?
Oh, nice.
So that's where the concept for the first film came out. And we wanted to keep things simple. We didn't want to make it like very highbrow. We just wanted to make it simple, like assassin doing his job, wants to quit. So it's a story you've heard a lot of different times, but we wanted to do it in our own way, with our own cultural identity attached to it. So that's why that film was shot in Hindi. So the first film that I did and produced was made out in India. So that was my entrance into the entertainment industry.
And so I love that too, because it's kind of a full circle thing. So like you say back in the early 2010s but now with the boom in the streaming services, right, and the technology where the phones you can literally shoot and put it straight up on the screen, that it's that good, and all of the kind of, there's so many more creatives out there creating content for themselves to get the opportunity, because content is so wanted right now, and there's such a void that needs to constantly be fed. And so making your own content and putting yourself out there, it's kind of like the standard thing now. It's like, this is how you get into it. You can do that. And I also like that, as somebody coming into it with no training, you didn't do theater, you didn't do classes, the kind of thing. So the intellect to know, okay, I'm going to start off with something drastically different from who I really am. To the knowledge to go, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to separate myself from me. I'm going to put this out into the world. That's fantastic, because a lot of people, you hear consistently, write what you know, write what you know, write what you know, or kind of dive in and play yourself, because that'll be the easiest thing to do. So the knowledge and the courage to know, no, I'm going to go completely opposite. I'm going totally what I am not. That's a brilliant move. That well done for that. I think that's the way to possibly approach it, is to not go straight in and be familiar. You want to challenge yourself. You want to take risks. And I think when you do that, it pays off.
I agree with you 100%. And I think that's the fun of this profession. You ideally want to inhabit characters that are so removed from yourself that it intrinsically becomes interesting to play them.
Right.
And you learn things along the way. So you wouldn't necessarily know how to fire a gun. You wouldn't necessarily know how to stalk somebody, but these are things you'd have to learn. You'd have to research them and understand what sort of mentality it takes to do that, which I'm not, well versed on. I'm not exactly like I'm not a fighter, and I'm not someone who's well versed in guns or gun lore. But it's something that you certainly have to learn. You have to go out to the range. You have to see how these weapons feel in your hand. So all that is part of the process, and that's the fun part of it, I guess.
Oh, for sure.
So
I love that. And I mean,
something different.
yeah, exactly. Trying to, expand your universe, basically expand who you are and your creative aspect, like I was talking about earlier. Now with learning the craft, obviously you're learning from different creatives that are coming in and out of your life and that you are working with. But what would you say is another big step about learning about filmmaking? Like, did you read a lot of stuff? Did you watch a lot of documentaries, or how did that go?
So I think the biggest thing that I learned was it had to do with writing a screenplay and understanding the structure of a screenplay and how it comes out in story, and whether or not it's going to capture your attention in that first 10 minutes and be able to propel you for that hour and a half to 2 hours that you're there in the theater. So that was my foundation, was really understanding a script. And because I was so attached to scripts, that's the approach I took to acting. So I would read the script several times, whether it was one I had written or recently, like the projects I'm working on. And I would try and understand, like, what's the writer's message here? So the most important thing to me was what is the writer trying to convey? So something I commonly do nowadays, in kind of in a roundabout way to answer that question, is when I'm working on projects, is I'll ask the producer, I'll say, hey, can I have access, to the writer? I don't really ask for access to the director right away, because I know that could be kind of tricky, but I will say, hey man, can I talk to the writer? Because I'm going to spend a lot of time just reading, and sometimes I don't understand things. And when I talk to the writer, I'm like, hey man, like, you wrote this here for this character, but I don't understand why should he have this emotion in this situation based on the backstory I understand. Then the writer will clarify, this is what I was thinking. And then you learn something about that, and you're able to inhabit the character better. So I think that the first thing I learned about filmmaking was the screenplay has to be the most important element of anything. Everything else is secondary. And so that's when I really, just pay homage to writers, writers who can write well, or just, that's amazing to me. I don't think I write well. I think I write adequately, but when I find screenplays that are written well, I'm just like, whoa,
yeah.
So cool.
Because it's not an easy thing to do. A lot of people don't. You brought up the word structure, right? Because there is a specific structure and the way it is put together, and that is not, and a perfect example of what you said, like, you have to draw them in the first 10 minutes, right? But sometimes that's extremely difficult for young writers to do, is how do I draw them in without giving everything away, right? So how do I not tell my whole story in the first 10 minutes? And then if I am successful at that, how do I now make it not drag to get to my ending, to get to that third act? And so it is a very specific process, and it's very difficult. And so I love that approach, because it does kind of get you into the mindset as an actor. Okay, this is how it's put together. This is where I'm coming from. This is where I'm going. This is what the path that I'm getting there. That's an excellent approach for an actor who doesn't have the background training to dive into it. So clearly you do a lot of behind the scenes work too, right? You mentioned that you produce and you clearly write. That's a whole different ballgame in itself, right? I think that's another great aspect to come at it, is when you're in front of the camera, if you have a knowledge of stuff behind the camera and what takes place, I think that's a huge benefit as well, because that's a whole different beast. Producing, that's a difficult job. Trying to pull everybody together, pull the money together, the locations, the logistics, putting the team together, that is a whole beast. And so if you have that knowledge, you have so much more in front of that camera, knowing what's happening behind that camera, right?
I totally agree with you. And I'll give you a concrete example. So I'm producing a film, and part of the responsibility of the producer is you sit in the edit.
Yeah.
And you watch every scene, you watch the takes, you watch the coverage, the reverse, the full, the singles. And it's so valuable as an actor to watch and edit, because once you're done with that, let's say you're back in front of the camera, you can relax, because there's coverage. You've got coverage in all different, and if you've got a good editor and a good director, you're going to be okay. They're going to get what they need out of you. You don't have to nail every single scene. You can relax, let your work speak for itself. and you don't need to get uptight about it. Like, no, give me another take. You're just like,
oh yeah,
you're like, you gotta trust the process. And I think that helps a lot when you're finally, like, in post-production, you're looking at scenes, and as an actor, you're like, oh, okay, so maybe that didn't work out so well. So let's go to this other guy.
yeah,
Right.
for sure.
Exactly. I think a big part of, the whole filmmaking process is to have a big open dialogue and collaboration on what everybody thinks is right. Obviously the producer, writer, and director, those are the ones leading the ship. They're the captains, it's their vision. But it's good to have that open dialogue to where you feel like it's a free space, to where you can feel like, maybe he'll say this at this point because it is your character that you are becoming and that you're putting yourself into that role. So I think that's also a good place to find yourself, and that's definitely the type of sets that we try to create as well, because we are a film and television production company as well. We just got done shooting our first film, and it was just something that we wanted to make it a big free space, very collaborative, to where, if you have an idea, let's take some time out, like develop that idea maybe, and see if it works with the script, and see if that we can use that moving forward. So I think that's very important.
That's true, man. I think the sets in which people are collaborating the most tend to be not only the funnest, but creatively they're the most rewarding. And it's very interesting to see what comes out of it.
Definitely.
Obviously there's some writer directors who will stick very much to the screenplay, and that works great. And the flip side of that is, here are the lines, play with it. Let's see what happens. And that's always a lot of fun.
Right. Well, then there's a great old quote in filmmaking where it's like, after you yell cut, keep rolling for, another, because sometimes you get the best stuff when it's ad-libbed, when it's just totally off the cuff, right? And so I feel like that collaboration and that freedom to be able to do that is sometimes absolutely what's needed. And like you said, then if you have a great editor, and you've got that stuff, if something that was so stuck to the script or so stuck to sometimes that stuff that wasn't, that's it. And the editor knows, hey, that's the one. We're going to plug that in. That's going to be really good. That's going to make it work. So, because let's be honest about it, an editor is, like, in my opinion, the most important person, because he can make or break a film depending on how he puts that bad boy together. It could be the best performance ever, but if it's not put together properly, it's going to be crap. And vice versa. It could be not so great, but they can make it look like it's an Oscar winner based on how they put that together. So, I mean, it's such a job that nobody really spends a lot of time thinking about, but so crucial to the success or failure, right?
100%. The editor can really enhance a film.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
just amazing what they can do, especially if you've worked on films where you've had one individual edit and then you bring in a polish editor. And certain scenes where you feel you were stuck, when you have someone come in with a different perspective or approach, they cut it together in a different way where you're no longer stuck. And so that's amazing. Yeah, you're 100% right. A lot of films can be so much better in the edit. So you don't have to be disheartened looking at that first pass. You're
Exactly.
like, oh no.
You're thinking, what did we just make? But then, it comes out fine. So you've also done, so you talked about how you started, and you're basically like, I'm going completely away from who I really am kind of stuff. Your resume is comedy. You've got action star. You've got your drama. You've got so you've successfully been able to play around in a lot of different areas and different characters. Do you have a favorite that you like, that you kind of like, that I do it all, but I kind of like this the most?
So I think I've played quite a few intense characters. So when I was able to play someone who had more of a comical nature, it was a relief, and it was just a lot of fun. There's a film coming up that we're finishing the shoot on. I think we're finishing the last part of the shoot in March. It's called Uppercut. It's a rom-com, if you will. The director calls it a bromantic comedy.
There you go.
It's just about this guy who really looks up to this other guy, but at the same time, he has a relationship with this female boxer who really helps him come of age.
Mm.
So it's a really nice story. It's funny. It's heartfelt, and I don't know. I had a lot of fun doing that because it was kind of a relief because, you know, I'd done several movies in a row where after every day I was just exhausted. I was like, man, you know, because you go to this place of intensity and it really takes a lot out of you. So I don't know. I mean, yeah, I think the comedy was fun. I mean, I think that's the funnest thing I've done so far. But I love drama too.
Oh, most definitely,
Good
man.
answer.
Most definitely. Well, we've been talking a lot about mental health on the podcast recently because we want to bring that to the forefront because it's so important, especially in this industry where, like you just said, you're playing such intense roles, and after every day, you can come back to the trailer or go back home and just exhausted. So, how do you deal with mental health in such a, you know, a world that can be very stressful, and especially in the audition process and playing intense roles?
So I got a program that I follow every day. So one of the things that is tantamount to me feeling good is I try and maintain a very regular sleep schedule, and I try and maintain a very regular exercise schedule, and I have a fairly mundane diet where I'm kind of eating similar foods. So when I'm hitting all three of those, where I'm getting enough rest, I'm getting enough motion, and I'm getting enough nutrients, I find that I tend to stay very focused and very centered, and a lot of the stress sort of slides off of me. And at the same time, you know, if you living here in Los Angeles, if you want to feel less stressed about your life, then just look at the world news. You know, really just flip the channel on and really immerse yourself into what's happening abroad. So if you can see a sound bite of 2,000 people are without electricity in the Ukraine. Turn the electricity off in your house for a day in the wintertime and take a cold shower.
Right.
Like, there's ways to do reality checks about what real stress is. So that's kind of what I do.
That's a great answer, and I also love the convergence of your two worlds, right? Medicine, and then the importance of the physical nature playing into the mental nature, because both are important to stay healthy. You know, and a lot of people don't understand that. So that's a great answer. All right, well, we've got to talk about it. We've got to jump into it. The new one that's out that just debuted. It's on video on demand now, and Repeater. This is the action one. This is an action one, not the comedy.
Right.
Yeah. So
That's
talk
right.
about that. Tell us a little bit about the story and how it came about, and a little bit about what's going on and all that kind of good stuff.
Sure. So I play this character named John Smith, who's a hitman for hire, an assassin for hire. He's targeting a hacker who's about to reveal corporate secrets of this large conglomerate. And the hacker is played by Nick Moran. My job is to seek and terminate. However, it's an open contract, and along the way, the relationship between Nick's character and mine's gets complicated. But there's also other assassins who are out to get him, and there's a relationship between my character and the other characters who are after him. And so it's kind of an interesting ripple effect in how some of their past is coming to the present. So it's an interesting take on the good old Mark story. You know, you got a Mark, you got to go after it, but something happens along the way. And so it was a lot of fun. It's produced by Robert Beaumont and directed by R.L.S. Frazier. And the way I got into the movie was that I was the co-lead of a film called Hustle Down with Tom Sizemore. So we were filming the Tom Sizemore film Hustle Down, where R.L.S. Frazier was directing and Beaumont was producing. And while they were filming that film, Repeater was in the pipeline.
Okay.
And they were looking for someone to play this guy named John Smith. And in Hustle Down, I played a bounty hunter. So it was kind of like a similar character, but with a completely different backstory. Like the repeater character, John Smith, has a much heavier backstory than the Turk character. The Turk character was very light. So Fraser was watching me in Hustle Down, and when Hustle Down concluded, he's like, "Hey, Paul, I need to, I want to talk to you. I want to debrief you." And I was like, "All right, man, that's cool." So, we talked, and, we exchanged pleasantries. We were like, "Yeah, this was a great experience. I really enjoyed working with you." And he's like, "Hey, how about we do another one?" I was like, "Well, what's going on?" He goes, "Well, I got this script here. I'm going to send it to you, read it over." And literally like 6 months later, we were kind of using the same production team, same director, same producer, but doing this film called Repeater. That's how I fell into it.
Oh,
So it
amazing.
was, I basically fell into it. It's one of those situations where you're not seeking it, or I guess I was auditioning for it for the
Yeah.
6 weeks we were shooting.
Right.
But I didn't know I was auditioning for it. And then at the end, I got the role because the director was cool with it.
Yeah.
I think that's so important too, that a lot of, up and comers that listen to the show should take away, especially from this interview, is, you don't know who you're going to meet. You just have to be a nice, general, just genuine person, I feel like, and kind person, because that can follow you to project, and that can help you get onto other projects and make connections and different things like that. The networking aspect is so important in this game, and I feel like that right there, that's why you got this role and fell into it, and obviously because of your talent. But it's just such an amazing thing that obviously an intellectual like you gets the grasp on, and I feel like a lot of people don't understand that concept.
And the other side of that is every performance matters. Whether it's an audition in the room, or you're doing a Zoom, or you're on a set currently filming and you're giving your performance, because it's always being watched. And somebody may see it and go, "That's our guy. We've been looking and looking, but that's the guy." Right? So even if you don't book it in your audition, blow it away anyway, because maybe you just did something that somebody is going to see, including that casting director or that director. Maybe you're not right for that, but they go, "Oh." And, 4 months down the line, they're like, "That's our guy. Remember that audition? That's our guy." So it's always so important to make sure that you're giving it everything you got, because that's the gig.
That Once again, you're 100% right. So you're right a lot, as you can tell.
Well,
So
thank you.
I'm
Thank you, sir. The check is in the mail.
I'm gonna go ahead and give you that. I'm amazed too by how, versus any other industry, networking in this industry is paramount. And I see it all the time. Like, I was talking to the director, and he was like, "Yeah, we got this this young actress to play this role, and it was between her and someone else." And I was like, "Well, why didn't you pick the other person? It seems like she's got like a higher profile, etc. She seems like she fits the role better." And he just looked at me and he said, "Well, this other one is great, and this other one's good, but I know the one who's good, and I have stranger danger." And I'm like, "What?
Yeah.
Stranger danger? What does that mean?" He goes, "Well, I have to, in this particular film, I have to get it done in a certain amount of time, and I can't afford to have any days taken away by, unusual circumstances."
Right.
And that's kind of like what you'll sometimes see on set. Is sometimes you'll see some difficult characters, and then you'll see how people kind of make up their minds, like they don't want to work with them anymore. And then at the same time, there's situations where you're at a premiere and you just happen to meet somebody who's an actor from a third person, and then you're in another film and you're like, "Hey, I just met this guy. He's really cool for the part," and etc. So yeah, it's crazy. Like, networking is king, and I kind of feel bad for people who aren't really entrenched in the industry, because the guys who are here and meeting people and walking around, they got an advantage. They just do.
And I think there's this falsehood from people that are not in the industry of this it's a huge community of, oh my gosh, it's all that. But it's really not, it's a very tight-knit, small community. Everybody does know everybody in one way or another.
Yeah.
So it's very important about how you conduct yourself when you're with people, because like you said, you say something bad this way or that way, somebody gets that way, and then they know this person, and then all of a sudden they know you said this, that. It's so important in this community to be very aware of everybody around and in the room.
Exactly. It's like if this person doesn't know them, they're one person away from knowing them. It's
That's
one
right.
of those type of situations. So I think you got a very good head on your shoulders, and I think you're going to go very far in all different aspects, because I love how you're open to so many different things and are always willing to learn, because I feel like a lot of people aren't. So we really appreciate that. That's so refreshing, because
Cool.
you know, we talk to some people and we've interacted with some people outside of the podcast where we're like, dude, you could be so much more, but your vision of how you're looking at things isn't necessarily the right way. So I mean, that's why we make this podcast, so we can try to help people map out their plan, you know, of how to approach this industry, because it is kind of cutthroat, but it also can be very generous and very supporting at the same time. So it's just one of those situations, and I'm so happy we got to have a conversation with a like-minded individual, because like I said, it's so refreshing, and we're in your corner, man. We're supporting you 100%.
Thank you.
Of course. Well, listen, thank you so much for taking time out of your night and coming to get a little crazy with us.
Yes.
You are welcome back anytime. Anytime you have another project coming out, please don't hesitate to ask. We will make room for you. And yeah, man, this was just a blast.
Thank you. I had a great time.
Good.
Very insightful.
Well, hey, man, like we said, we always like speaking with like-minded individuals, and it's fantastic to see you just thriving and succeeding. Before we let you go, it's all about social media these days. Are you on social media? Where can people find you?
Yep, I'm on Instagram. I am the real Paul Sidhu.
Fantastic.
Not the fake one, the real one.
I'm the real one. Some dude told me to, I remember when I was making it like this account like several years ago, and some guys like at the time he was like, yeah, just make it the real Paul Sidhu. And I was like, yeah, but I don't think anybody wants to be Paul Sidhu. Okay, so how about a Paul Sidhu?
Right.
Okay? But he's like, no, it just sounds cooler. So I did it, and ever since then I've regretted it. I've always wanted to change it.
Right. That's so
You
funny.
can go the Ohio State route. The Paul Sidhu. Yeah.
I wanted to go a Paul Sidhu. Okay,
There you go.
That's
there
so
you go.
funny. That's so funny. Well, listen, man, take care, and we'll be talking to you soon, brother.
All right, guys. Take care.
Yep.
Thank
Have a
you.
good one, man.
Bye.
You too. Bye.
Man, he was just so freaking humble, and like when he was talking about his process and the screenwriting thing, everybody don't judge me, but I was thinking about the food pyramid, and screenwriting was at the very bottom, and you just kind of work your way up with different sections, and that's just kind of what envisioned to me. That's a very different aspect and approach to literally getting into filmmaking from the ground up.
Yeah, because and to be so successful without any training, right?
Yeah.
It's just another example of if you have the passion and you have the drive, you can do it. You just have to work hard and go for it and find your path.
Yep.
And he's been able to successfully do that. Clearly a very intelligent man. I was
Very.
impressed with the vocabulary.
Yeah.
Like, he kept dropping words, and I'm like, this is an educated man
Yeah.
who... But, also the way he said, it works the other side of my brain.
Mm-hmm.
So because, what the brain that you use for medical and the brain that you use for film is a whole different world. And so it's always nice to see people be able to do it all. Like, it's fantastic.
Most definitely. Thank you again, Paul Sidhu, for coming on the show.